Hey neighbor, welcome back to ARTV. My name is John and it's time to review the debut Hayley Williams solo album, Petals For Armor. For years, the frontwoman fought off the idea of doing a project without her band until it just naturally, accidentally happened after the end of the last Paramore cycle. Paramore has remained one of my favorite bands over the course of 15 years for a reason. They grew up and showed that they could do something more when many of their contemporaries got stuck in the same lane or else changed the soul of their band to the point where they were unrecognizable. Some would argue that After Laughter wasn't rocky enough and that this was their selling out point, but I'd argue that those listeners didn't study the lyrics or appreciate the detailed instrumentation that went into nearly every track. Despite its poppier sound, I never at all felt that I wasn't listening to a Paramore album. And much of that could be traced back to the strong, albeit depressing as hell writing from Hayley and Taylor York. When that pair links up, you're in a gold mine, and I was really thrilled to see Hayley wasn't taking the typical singer leaves successful band and makes solo record route. Instead of gunning for the top 40 charts, she enlisted the help of close friends and family to help write, produce, and record the nuanced Petals For Armor. I've said my piece on the scattered rollout process, but I was genuinely captivated by the two songs I did hear preceding the full-length experience. Zimmer is a breathy meditation on rage that felt like the perfect choice for her debut solo single, and the follow-up Leave It Alone was a moody look in a muddied mirror that makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand up as I soaked in the Radiohead-influenced direction. I think my biggest worry going into this is that she would take too much influence from a singular place, or that 15 tracks would feel a little bit overly long and bloated. With all of this anticipation hanging in the air like fog, did Hayley bite the bullet and go all in, or is this a letdown that shouldn't have seen the light of day? Never fear, Hayley Williams is here, and she's being brutally honest too, much like the steps she took on After Laughter. Life hasn't been kind, and depression, worry, love, and a feminine perspective are all roadblocks she had to overcome in order to write what we're hearing on the album. As the artist herself has said, the music feels very earthy with all of the various metaphors and imagery conjured up. It wasn't one of those journeys that took me a while to get on board with to see the direction that she was running with. In fact, my final thoughts line up pretty closely with how I felt after my first listen through. Much of the writing zooms in on Hayley's past, the guilt and shame she's carried for her past relationship, and the toxic culture she felt affixed to that she couldn't separate from for the longest time. This project is about her finding her voice and her feminine side after shoving it down for so long, something that becomes a lot more apparent after a few listens through the album and hearing all of these references to scents and flowers and nature in regards to her feminine side. There's a lot of tonal shifts in the album, and you can certainly see the turning point in the record lyrically, but Petals For Armor definitely does some genre bouncing over the course of its 15 tracks. With Taylor York producing the entirety of the record alongside Hayley, there's a natural chemistry that makes the songs feel like they belong together rather than just being a collection of thoughts or singles. Beyond that consistency in the writing and production, I'd say that there's one major element that keeps you on the hook and curious. Joey Howard, who you may know for touring with Paramore, killed it with the bass work on Petals. I seriously don't know when the last time was that I saw this much detailed bass work go into an indie pop or rock album of this nature. It really jumps out in the mix at all the right times. Since we're seeing the bass sitting in the passenger seat so often, that leads us to more of the minimal approach that some of these songs take in terms of guitars and creeping keys, or the real telltale sign that this is something separate from Paramore, Hayley's singing. While I, like any other sane individual out there, am a huge fan of when she belts it out and lets the vocals soar, this album has fewer of those moments, so that when they do appear, it's like spotting a bald eagle flying over your house or something. Those spine-tingling deliveries are heard on some of the massive moments like Love and Sudden Desire, but it's never overdone to the point where it feels like she's trying to pass it off as something to appease Paramore fans. On that note, Petals For Armor isn't something that Paramore fans should hesitate to check out for fear of not being into the sound. It's certainly different, but it's not a total pivot away from her strengths or anything. Honestly, it's just like living proof that she can nail something outside of her forte, watering it slowly with nurturing love until it blooms. The blossoms have finally sprouted, and while it's not a perfect album, it's a lot of fun to play through, whether you're listening closely with a magnifying glass to the lyrics, or if you just want to dance around the house while airing out all those internalized feelings. Bumpy roads lie ahead as Hayley can change lanes at a moment's notice, but that kind of turbulence is true to daily life as well, and as a result of that, I'm finding getting the changes in pressure to not only be likable, but necessary. The truth is that I wouldn't know which songs to cut to make this a bit shorter, but it does slightly drag on certain corners of the album. It's all very personal, and I can understand why Hayley feels so defensive of it. I mean, it's her first step out as a solo artist. It's terrifying, I'm sure. But what I'm getting at is that the variety she presents makes this so easy to just sit down and listen to in one sitting, even though it's almost an hour long. Buckle in for some strong influences from Bjork, Radiohead, and 80s dance music with a Hayley Williams twist. I was instantly impressed with how much this song stuck to my brain after my first listen, and by the 5th time around, I could easily sing back a large portion of the lyrics. To boot, the mixing and mastering on this thing is literally top-notch pristine quality, so throw on a pair of headphones and have a proper listen to hear all of those extra little details in the mix. Moving in order here, we'll start with the lead single and opening track, Zimmer. Featuring those breathy, scattered vocals in the intro, a looming bass line, and fiery lyrics, this only gets better with time, and I've played the hell out of this rage-induced moment. Some of those one-liners are ridiculously fun to shout out, the give in, plus we got to hear Hayley say fucker on a track, so no real complaints here. Leave It Alone is a very intimate, string-filled ode to the changing tides of life and an experience with her grandmother after an injury left her unable to remember certain details of her life. It's a very sad, tender, thoughtful, Tom York-esque track that's deeply moving as the bass tugs you down under the tide, only to help you surface again fully cleansed on the other side. Cinnamon is a wonky reflection on Hayley's femininity that strongly reminded me of Fiona Apple in the sense that it's pretty damn percussive. This is one of the weaker tracks on the LP. It takes a while to get going, and I almost feel that she's a little bit too clear in the mix, like damn, Hayley hitting me with the ASMR levels of close at times. But there's some really rich instrumentation to love once this song really gets rolling, so it's by no means a total wash. A breakout surprise is manifested in Creepin, a rhythmic bite that sees Hayley confronting the gawkers trying to drain something from her over a stuttered bass line and crafty guitar work. It's all about energy vampires, and you know what? I'm just gonna be the one to say it. Why'd she do my boy Colin Robinson so dirty?
My name is Colin Robinson, and I am what's known as a psychic vampire, or energy vampire.
He's a good man, potentially the opposite of this solar flare burst of sexual energy found on the stunning Sudden Desire. This song? Wow! To say that it slaps might be downplaying it a bit, because it's actually fucking fantastic. There's no holding back here as she describes what she wants from her lover, and the embarrassing hangover of unrequited feelings, or else the knowledge of, yeah, I probably shouldn't have let that happen because it's gonna be bad for me in the long run. It's so distinct. Her vocals riveted me on this performance, a key track that's definitely a huge part of why this album works. Dead Horse is a lot more pleasant than its title would imply, using the idiom to tie off her past guilt to a balloon and send it flying away into the night sky as she tries to make peace. It's quite jubilant and upbeat with one of the catchiest hooks on Petals For Armor, but then there's a truckload of remorse dropped off at your doorstep as Hayley finally addresses her ex-husband in a moment that feels like she did it on her own terms, not because people want to know. That swift swerving into other lanes I mentioned happens right after Dead Horse as we arrive at My Friend, a very gloomy sounding song that feels like somebody extending their hand to a person close to you, knowing that they're gonna be there to help you back up. I talk about bright sounding songs with dark lyrics all the time, it's one of my favorite things, but this actually might be a case of a dark rain cloud sound that's actually a lot more optimistic than you'd think. That optimism carries over to the next song, Over Yet too, smashing you over the head with a borderline dance punk meets 80s synth pop sound that serves as a reminder of how well she's carried over her roots into something I could see being played on the radio. There's no reason the bass work had to go that hard, yet it did! And then that bridge where she sings multiple times for every darkened part of me before getting back into the process of getting out of her own head? Total power move. Rose's Lotus Violet Iris provides that beautiful earthy imagery to an even bigger degree, setting the acceptance of her feminine side ablaze alongside the voices of the supergroup Boy Genius. There's something about the way that the strings swell, the kiss of the tempered drumming, the well-colored vocals from everyone including Hayley, who really has some power moments behind the mic that remind me a bit of the Brand New Eyes era. It's really one of the best songs here, and that's definitely saying something given the company. Why We Ever almost feels a little bit too predictable with the way that its bass line moves during the chorus, but it truly doesn't detract from this magnetizing slow dance with the demons of the past. There's something so warm and nostalgic about this one. There's a spark in her eyes that seems to look back fondly before remembering the darkness that far outweighed the good. The transition in the song's second half is as cold as ice as we drop into a brutal reality and skeletal piano that feels all too familiar. The high and the come down, the valley effect, a roller coaster ride, whatever you want to call it. Also, you might notice that the melody in the intro sounds super similar to Sudden Desire. That kind of leads me to believe that these songs are intrinsically connected in some way. Now I finally get to talk about Pure Love. Hands down the best song on the album. I am pressing that button right now, even though it's a very close race. It marks a turning point for Hayley accepting love from a partner again after feeling so broken in the past, much like the person we heard on After Laughter. Groove the pain into the rear view as you hear her unleashing everything with an outstanding vocal show and some simple but effective commentary on relationships. Jumping that mental hurdle on such a distinct song makes it that much more impressive, and I shit you not, after my first listen through this album, that night after, I was already humming the melody as I fell asleep. Sneaky lounge music pops up next on Taken, something that I can imagine listening to on a long-ass elevator ride up to the top of the Space Needle. It's a slice of soft rock featuring feathery drums, retro keys, and oh yeah, confirmation that Hayley's in a new relationship. What? Come on, I don't even want to say it. I think we all know who it's about. There's literally no one else that makes any sense. It's being dangled right before our eyes, and oh my god, I sound like a 16-year-old, so I'm just gonna leave it at this. I'm happy for Hayley, and this song does a solid job at conveying a little wink and a nod to the camera, even if it is a bit dull. Sugar on the Rim certainly isn't, though. If anything, it's one of the more vibrant offerings, stuffed to the brim with eccentric sounds and escalating whimsical music that feels very 90s dance floor throwback-ish. I think that's how it feels, but then again, my perception has changed more and more as I've warmed up to it. Nearing the end of the album, we encounter Watch Me While I Bloom. On this one, she tears herself down to size in a way that reminds me of the writing on After Laughter, but the fine line splitting those two hairs is the confidence with which she builds herself back up. I'm a lot in spite of me was the main lyric I found replaying in my head, but I'm feeling a bit more mixed on the music for this one. There's elements that feel borrowed from, or else a bit too similar to, other songs on the album, and the overarching prowess she flexes make it worth hearing in the context of the record, but I don't think I'll be getting a lot of mileage out of this one in the replay department as an individual song. And like gospel, Hayley puts the finishing touch on her debut solo album on one of the most gripping and visceral tunes, Crystal Clear. With additional vocals from her grandfather in the mix, which was super cute, among the ocean of metaphors about finding love when you're so scared of falling, this song is seriously the perfect cherry on top of an expertly crafted album. Making a final call on Petals For Armor proved to be a little bit mind-bending, but I'm landing at a strong 4 for the debut solo album from the Paramore frontwoman Hayley Williams. That's of course all just my opinion, so I would love to know what you're thinking. Sound off with your take in the comments below. That was a lot, and I hope that you don't mind the longer upload, so if you did enjoy hearing my review, then do me a favor, take a second and hit that like button. If you're new to my channel, then hi, welcome to the neighborhood, subscribe and hit the bell if you want to see more content like this. Catch my review of After Laughter by tapping here, and another review right over here. Other than that, socials in the description, and I'll see you soon for more on ARTV.